In the quiet suburbs where every mailbox matched and every lawn looked like it was trimmed by angels, I thought I had finally found peace. The kind of peace that comes with cul-de-sacs, lemonade on the porch, and waving neighbors who remember your dog's name better than your own. But as I would soon learn, even paradise has a price. And her name was Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor. No, Karen was the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, a woman who clutched the HOA handbook like it was sacred scripture and recited the bylaws like gospel. She had a walkie-talkie, a clipboard, and a passion for micromanaging other people's happiness. At first I tried to ignore it. I figured every neighborhood had someone like her, overzealous, high-strung, maybe even lonely. But something about the way she strutted down the sidewalk, eyes scanning for violations like a hawk looking for prey, made it clear this wasn't a hobby. This was her identity. And unfortunately for me, I had just become her latest project. It started small. A passive-aggressive flyer on my door about trash bins. A stern knock when my grass was a bit too tall. But I could feel it brewing, like a summer storm on the horizon. Something about me, my independence, my refusal to grovel, rubbed her the wrong way. I wasn't trying to stir the pot. I just wanted to enjoy my little slice of the American dream in peace. But peace doesn't last long when there's a tyrant with a hose living across the street. What I didn't know then was that our little neighborhood feud was about to turn into an all-out war. And trust me, when Karen crossed the line, I made sure she remembered who she was messing with. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where everything felt just a little too perfect. The sun was warm, but not hot. Birds chirped like a Disney soundtrack, and I had just finished my coffee when I noticed the bright yellow slip taped to my front door. At first, I thought it was a delivery notice, maybe a package I forgot I ordered. But as I got closer, the bold letters at the top made my stomach turn. HOAVIOLATIONNOTICE. I blinked. A violation. For what? I peeled the paper from the door and read it twice to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Garbage bins must be no more than 12 inches from the curb. Your bins were placed 15 inches from the curb. This is your first warning. I looked over at the sidewalk, at the empty space where my bins had sat less than an hour ago. 3 inches. 3 measly inches. Across the street I spotted her. Karen, standing in her driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, sipping from a mug that probably said something like "Boss Babe." She didn't wave, she just stared, smug, triumphant, like she had just won something. I considered walking over, maybe to talk it out, clear up any misunderstanding. So I did. I took a breath, straightened my posture, and approached her with what I hoped was a neighborly smile. "Hey, Karen, about the trash bins. Was that really necessary?" She didn't even blink. "Rules are rules," she said flatly, eyes hidden behind her mirrored lenses. "We all agreed to uphold the standards when we moved in." "Sure," I replied, trying to keep my tone calm. "But it was 3 inches. Isn't there some room for a little grace?" She sipped her coffee and turned to walk back into her house. That's not how communities thrive. It starts with 3 inches. Then it's overgrown lawns and broken shutters. I won't let this neighborhood fall apart. I stood there, stunned, watching her disappear behind her front door like a villain in a daytime soap. That was the moment I realized something important. Karen wasn't here to help the community. She was here to control it. And I had just been marked. Spring arrived with a vengeance, and with it came the itch to finally make the front of my home feel like mine. I'd lived under the drab HOA-approved look for over a year, and I'd had enough. The grass was the same sterile green as everyone else's, the mulch was uniform, and even the mailbox looked like it had been copied and pasted from a template. I needed something personal, something that brought color, texture, maybe even a little joy. So I stopped by the nursery one weekend and bought a few flats of marigolds, lavender, and creeping phlox. I knew exactly what I wanted. Just a small flower bed under my front window, a gentle curve edged with stone. Nothing flashy, nothing wild. It took me all afternoon, but by sunset it looked perfect. Warm bursts of yellow and purple bloomed from the soil like fireworks. The fragrance of lavender drifted through the air. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down to compliment it. I was proud, not defiant, just proud. And I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would let this one go. I was wrong. The next morning, a heavy knock pounded at my door like a police raid. I opened it to find Karen standing there with a clipboard in one hand and a violation notice in the other. Her lips were pressed into a grim line, and her eyes flicked from me to the flower bed, like she was surveying a crime scene. "This is not within HOA-approved guidelines," she said without even greeting me. I blinked. "It's a flower bed." "You extended beyond the pre-designated landscaping boundary," she snapped. "All vegetation must stay within the original developer's footprint. You've added unauthorized edging and non-native species." "They're marigolds," I said flatly. "They're not invading the Amazon." Karen held out the notice. "This is your second offense. You have 7 days to remove the plants and return the property to its prior state. You've also been fined $100. I stared at the paper, then back at her. "You're seriously fining me for flowers?" "This isn't personal," she said, and I could see the faintest smile curling in the corner of her mouth. "It's about maintaining harmony." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took the paper, shut the door quietly, and sat down at my kitchen table. I looked out the window at my beautiful little flower bed, now marked for demolition. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was punishing personality, erasing anything that didn't fit her mold. That night, I dug up every flower. Not because I was defeated, but because I was patient. You don't fight a petty tyrant with louder words. You beat them with planning. And in that moment, while pulling up lavender roots under the moonlight, I realized Karen had just watered the seed of something much more dangerous. My resolve. The day was already simmering before the sun had fully risen. One of those muggy, unforgiving mornings where the air felt like a damp towel clinging to your skin. I had just let my dog Max out onto the front lawn. He was a sweet old mutt, more interested in sniffing dandelions than doing any real damage. He waddled to his usual patch under the oak tree and did his business while I stood nearby, sipping water and enjoying what little breeze the day offered. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable squeak of a screen door. I turned slowly and saw her. Karen, standing on her porch in that same beige tracksuit she always wore, arms folded tightly across her chest, like she was holding in rage with nothing but spite and lycra. Her eyes were locked on Max, and her nostrils flared like a bull about to charge. "You're letting that thing kill the grass again," she shouted across the street. "He's peeing," I called back, confused but calm. "That's what dogs do." "Not on shared property," she snapped, stepping off her porch. "The runoff seeps into other yards. My grass has yellow spots because of you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Karen, your lawn is fine. It looks like you airbrush it every morning." She didn't find it funny. Without another word, she marched toward her garden hose, yanked it from its holder like she was preparing for war, and turned the nozzle with a vengeance. Before I could react, a blast of cold water smacked me square in the chest. Max yelped and bolted for the porch. I stood there, stunned, dripping, as the spray hit my face and soaked my shirt completely through. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, stepping back. But she didn't stop. She aimed the stream at my feet, my legs, then my midsection, like she was cleaning a dirty sidewalk. Maybe now you'll respect the rules, she barked. I raised my hands and slowly backed away, water sloshing in my shoes, heart pounding. Neighbors began peeking out through blinds. One opened their door but quickly closed it again. No one stepped in. No one said a word. When she finally stopped, she stood there panting like she'd just won a championship round, hose still twitching in her hand. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply turned around and walked back into my house, trailing wet footprints across the porch. That was the moment something inside me clicked. Not with rage, but with clarity. Karen had declared war. And while she used water to humiliate me, I'd use it to ruin her. If she wanted to play games with hoses, I'd show her what a real flood looked like. I spent the next few days thinking about water, not in the poetic life-giving sense, but in a calculated mechanical way. Pipes, valves, pressure settings. I studied my sprinkler system like a man possessed. Karen had used water as a weapon, so it only felt right that water would be the instrument of her undoing. But I wasn't going to stoop to her level with a simple hose fight. No, I wanted something bigger, something she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. I started by reviewing the HOA's recent amendments. During the last drought season, they'd passed a motion encouraging smart irrigation systems to conserve water. Ironically, Karen had championed that motion. Her signature was on the digital memo, bragging about environmental responsibility and future-proofing our landscape. That memo would become the very key to her downfall. Because according to the fine print, homeowners could install programmable sprinkler systems as long as they met water-saving standards, and no one had written rules about the direction those sprinklers had to face. So I upgraded. I went online and ordered the most advanced smart sprinkler system I could find. One with directional heads, zone control, and remote access. I spent a full weekend digging new trenches in my yard under the guise of a landscape refresh. Karen watched from across the street, arms folded, lips pursed. She had no idea what I was really building. Every sprinkler head I installed was a calculated chess move. Some were angled to water my flower beds, of course. But 2 zones, discreetly placed near the property line, were set with a little more mischief. When fully powered, they could cast a gentle but persistent arc of water right across the street, toward Karen's pristine flower beds and her front foundation. I made sure to set the flow rate low enough to avoid detection at first, just enough to saturate over time like a slow leak. The beauty of it was plausible deniability. My yard, my system, all within the bounds of the HOA's eco-friendly guidelines. I tested it carefully. Early morning runs, late night adjustments, even used a decibel meter app to make sure the system ran whisper quiet. No splashing, no dramatic sprays. Just the subtle hiss of retribution. To make it perfect, I synced it to her schedule. Karen's routine was clockwork. She left for yoga at 6:45 a.m., returned by 8:10. Inspections happened every other Thursday, lawn treatments on Saturday. I programmed the sprinklers to run at 7 a.m. on the day before inspection, during her absence. And just to sweeten the plan, I scheduled 3 short sessions, enough to thoroughly soak the area in intervals, without drawing suspicion. I even rehearsed the conversation in my head. Oh, that? Must have been a glitch. I've been fiddling with the settings lately. These smart systems are tricky sometimes. I could play dumb and apologetic while her begonias floated down the street. By the time everything was in place, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not anger, not even satisfaction, just focus. I hadn't picked a fight. I'd simply refused to lose one. Karen had waged her war with rules and hoses and bureaucratic pride. I was about to answer with timing, technology, and irony. Water had humiliated me once. But next time, it would tell a very different story. The morning arrived cloaked in silence, just like I'd planned. The air was heavy with humidity, the kind that warned of storms even if the sky was clear. I was already awake when my sprinklers hissed to life at exactly 7 a.m., their gentle rhythmic spray almost soothing. I stood at the window in my robe, coffee in hand, and watched the first arc of water sweep across the edge of Karen's lawn. It glistened in the early sunlight, beautiful and devastating in equal measure. She had just left for yoga, same oversized tote bag, same dramatic slam of the car door, same screech of tires down the road like she had somewhere important to be. That gave me roughly 90 minutes to carry out phase 1. The first cycle lasted 10 minutes, just enough to wet the mulch and saturate the topsoil. 20 minutes later, the second cycle kicked in. This one had more pressure, a longer duration, and a tighter angle, pushing the runoff closer to her foundation. I watched as little streams began to trickle down the slope of her flower bed, pooling at the base of her front porch. By the time the third cycle began, the damage was well underway. Her perfectly arranged river rocks were floating out of place. The decorative bark she'd installed last week, natural redwood blend, she'd told everyone, was now clumping in dark, soggy mounds. Water crept across her walkway, pushing past the cracks in the concrete, seeping toward the vented crawl space that sat just inches above ground level. I didn't have to break in. I didn't need to touch a single brick of her house. I just let gravity and poor drainage do their work. When she returned, right on schedule, her Prius jerked to a halt halfway into the driveway. I saw her mouth open in shock as she took in the scene. Her precious flower bed was a mess of upturned roots and soggy soil. The front steps were slick with mud, the wood beginning to discolor at the edges. She ran to the door, nearly slipping, and disappeared inside. Moments later, the yelling began, muffled but furious. Then silence. A few hours passed before the maintenance van pulled up. By then, I'd turned off the system and gone about my morning like it was any other Thursday. When Karen emerged again, she didn't have her clipboard. She had a phone pressed to her ear and a look of disbelief frozen on her face. I watched her pace her lawn, heels sinking into mud, mascara smudged from sweat and panic. She never looked in my direction. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't. But she'd just learned the hard way that water, like people, has limits. And when it's pushed too far, it finds a way to rise. The aftermath came swiftly, like a domino effect she never saw coming. The next morning, a white HOA inspection car rolled down the street right on schedule, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the properties like radar. Karen, ever the enforcer, would have normally been waiting outside, ready to escort the inspector to every minor offense in the neighborhood. But not today. Today, her blinds stayed shut. Her front door, usually wide open with a flag flapping in the breeze, was bolted tight. The inspector paused outside her property, eyes narrowing at the mess. The flower bed was unrecognizable. Pools of water still lingered, mulch scattered across the sidewalk like wet confetti. And then there were the dark stains creeping along the siding of her house, damp streaks that told a deeper story. He took pictures, scribbled notes, shook his head. For once, the clipboard was turned against her. Within 48 hours, Karen's house failed its inspection. That alone would have been enough poetic justice. But karma had a more thorough agenda. Water had found its way under the floorboards, seeping into her crawl space and saturating the insulation. Mold took hold faster than expected in the summer heat. Her insurance company came out for an evaluation and quickly denied her claim, citing homeowner negligence. It was, after all, preventable water damage. They suggested a full tear-out and remediation, thousands of dollars in repairs. She appealed, of course, but the answer remained the same. Word spread quickly. The same neighbors who used to scurry away when she walked by now whispered in their driveways. Some laughed behind closed curtains. Others were quietly relieved. Her grip on the neighborhood had started to unravel. The flyers stopped showing up on doors. The weekly patrols ceased. And the clipboard. No one saw it again. She tried to rally, calling an emergency HOA board meeting to address acts of sabotage, but no one showed. She stood alone at the community centre, red-faced and furious, speaking into an empty room. Days later, she submitted her resignation from the HOA board due to personal reasons. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile when I saw her drag her once immaculate welcome mat into the trash. But I did water my flowers that evening, a little longer than usual, just enough to make sure the soil soaked up every last drop of satisfaction. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, freer, like a weight had quietly lifted off everyone's shoulders. The whispers faded, the tension dissolved, and for the first time since moving in, people actually stopped to chat by their mailboxes instead of glancing nervously over their shoulders. Karen's house, once the shining example of suburban conformity, looked tired and faded. The siding never quite recovered from the water damage, and the lawn she once obsessively manicured now struggled to grow through patches of dead, mold-stained earth. She kept to herself. No more HOA announcements. No more angry knocks on doors. The flags came down. The porch stayed empty. Her war had ended, and she had lost not with a bang, but with a soggy whimper. As for me, I planted my flowers again, bigger, bolder, and with even more color. This time, no one said a word. I added solar lights and a small sign that read, "Welcome to our happy mess." Neighbors smiled when they walked by. Some even asked for gardening tips. It was like my tiny rebellion had turned into a quiet revolution. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I sat on my porch with Max curled at my feet, sipping iced tea and listening to the gentle rhythm of my sprinkler system, ticking through its cycle. Sometimes I'd glance across the street, where Karen's porch light flickered weakly in the twilight, and I'd feel no anger, no bitterness, just peace. Some people fight with rules, others fight with water, but sometimes karma doesn't come crashing down with thunder. It trickles in, one drop at a time, until even the strongest facade crumbles. She sprayed me with a hose. I answered with a flood. And in the end, nature itself delivered the justice she never saw coming.